This week on the Research Rundown presented by the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, host Joe Rauch of the Philadelphia Phillies sits down with Jacob Newburn of the Texas Rangers to talk red light therapy and recovery tools, how athletic trainers are using them, what they actually do, and the science behind it. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Research Rundown on the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. My name is Joe Rauch. I'm assistant athletic trainer with the Philadelphia Phillies. Today I get to chat with Jacob Newburn, assistant athletic trainer with the Texas Rangers. Over 20 years of baseball experience, his 8th season on the big league level. And we got a fun topic today talking about recovery programs and recovery protocol for our players, and most specifically red light therapy and laser therapy. So should be an interesting topic. And Jacob, just appreciate your time and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for inviting me to be here. I really like what you guys are doing, and I'm glad to be a part of this.
Awesome. Well, recently PBATS sends out a monthly newsletter to our membership and people that sign up. So if not signed up for it yet, you can on pbats.com. And in the last month or 2 months ago, you made a commentary on red light therapy, and I thought it was really, really interesting. And maybe you could just start by introducing the topic for us and just tell us your overall thoughts, and then we'll start diving into it.
All right. Well, we sat down with the Gatorade Sports Science Institute when we did our newsletter, and we were trying to come up with what are current topics in athletic training and professional baseball. And red light therapy is taking, I would say, the modality world by storm. You can't go through our vendor showcase without seeing it on over half the tables. Every single one of the vendors we work with seems like they're coming out with some version of it. So I thought it'd be good for us to dive into it, learn more about it, and then get that out to the membership and put it in the Sports Science newsletter, just to give everybody kind of a baseline of what it is. And what it is science that has actually been around for quite a while. Those of us that have been in athletic training for a long time, we remember the old STEM combo units that had the red light handle on it. And we called those cold lasers back in the day, or a red light shower. And the science has come a long way since then, to get away from the laser side of things and use LED lights. And you're getting the same effect from an LED as you were from a laser back then, because it's about the frequency of the light and not exactly how it's being emitted. So, in basic speaking, it's red light therapy is just red light, is 600 to 700 newton meters or nanometers of light. That's a brain fart. It's nanometers of light. So 600 to 700 is the wavelength you're looking for. And that is just true red light. So when you see, a light bulb that's shining red at you, that's what you're getting. Now, what that does is it stimulates in the mitochondria the cytochrome C oxidase, which helps fight oxidation. So when all the beauty and aesthetics and all these companies are putting out masks and wands for your wives and mothers and girlfriends to use, those are treating the mitochondria and the skin cells and helping rejuvenate them. The intensity of those is not at such that it would get to a depth that would treat muscle or anything further down. But the science is settled on this. Since 2017, there has been very good science showing that at the skin level, at the surface level, those cells are fighting oxidation when red light is put upon them. So that science is fairly settled. Now, when you get into like dosages and things like that, that's still up for interpretation or based off the machine or the light you're using. Now, when it gets into what we use it for, when we start talking about stronger, trying to get deeper into the tissue, we start looking at more of the near infrared, which is beyond 700, usually 760 to about 1200. And really the therapeutic doses we're using are somewhere between 760 and 980. And again, the science on this is not settled. There is not a lot of research that looks specifically at each individual wavelength. It's more using ranges. It's more using different products, different intensities, different dosages, and there's nothing really standardized in the research. And again, a lot of the research is being paid for by companies coming out with the products. So it's not third-party tested. It's not peer-reviewed. But, from someone like us that is using the products, the anecdotal evidence is phenomenal. And we start to wonder why it's causing, the osteoarthritis, making guys with some osteoarthritis and some deep joint pain feel better. And it seems as if what's happening is stimulation of the water molecules deep within the cells and deep within tissue. And when those water molecules get excited, they vibrate and then create heat. And the heat is coming internally instead of from an external source. So instead of a shortwave diathermy or a hot pack or hot water, where you're getting that conductive exterior heat that, that goes about 3 to 5 centimeters deep, you're getting something deeper in the cell that's getting hot and then coming forward to the surface. So a lot of times when you're using a laser, a 40-watt laser, you're doing a treatment, a guy says it feels hot and the skin's not even red. You can touch the skin's hot, but there's no redness at the surface. It's because that heat is deeper than the surface. And you're stimulating water molecules within the skin. So again, when we preach hydration to players, if you're hydrated, the red light and infrared therapies are actually going to help you more. So that's also something we preach to our guys is, hey, if you're going to go get in the red light bed, let's hydrate really well, because that's going to help stimulate the intracellular water molecules and give you more to work with.
So much good stuff to unpack there, and but because it's kind of there's a lot of layers to this, right? And one of the things that I want to touch on, your answer was really scientific from the standpoint of a couple different ways, but specifically like talking about like how it affects on a cellular level and how the red light is absorbed. And I think it can be a little daunting and overwhelming with some of the verbiage, but there's an important piece to understanding that. And I'm curious what your experience is, because I've noticed in the last number of years, guys' curiosity, the players' curiosity about what we're doing for them has started to peak a little bit. Like they're actually interested in the very specifics of the answer. They want a little bit more detail. They're actually interested a little bit more in the science. Like I feel like when I talk to a lot of the PBATS members, one of our strengths as a group is building good relationships with our players and building trust that we're there to help them. But they're asking more detailed questions. So I'm curious, when you introduce a laser therapy or a light therapy to one of your players, from this standpoint of maybe just heating, using it as a heat modality or using it as maybe a prep modality or something like that, what's the conversation like for you, and how deep into that science piece do you get, or how do you kind of make it digestible so they understand why you're making the decision to put this modality into their care plan?
That's a great question. And I guess you got to know your athlete and know which ones are really diving into the science. They Google, they AI search. I mean, it's a lot of Chat GPT these days where the guy looks something up and then he comes in, he's like, what does this mean? And then I have to kind of unpack and work backwards from where they are and then figure out what they understand at a base level and build from there. But when I'm selling a modality to a guy, like, hey, here's why we're going to use the laser today. Here's why I would like you to get in the red light bed. Here's why I think we don't need to start using this modality right now, but let's give it in 2 or 3 days. It is when I am trying to explain those things that I start to get into the science. If a guy with a fresh injury is wanting to go use the red light bed and wants to know what settings, I explain to him, hey, you should use this setting for the acute because it has lower, infrared, and we don't want to create too much heat in the area because we want to limit the amount of inflammation flooding the body. So, if we're trying to get more of the fight the oxidation, those kind of things, if it's directly post surgery and we want to, really help the scar tissue and wound healing, then, the more red light that's on there, the better. And I explain that to them, like how it's helping more of the surface tissue versus the deep tissue. Those things are very helpful. But as kids say these days, if you want to give information, you got to bring receipts. So you have to have your science kind of backing you up, because if you tell a guy something and he goes and chat GPTs it and finds out something completely different, you lose buy-in. And then they think you're just lying to them and they'll call you out on it. So I always have to double check my my research, and I'll AI search it, I'll Google search it, and sometimes you have to catch them on the fact that, hey, AI doesn't know everything and it's blending studies and making stuff up sometimes. So
no, it's a really good point. I guess guys have always been curious, but they're a little bit more specific about how they're asking some questions now, right? Because they're leaning into the, hey, ChatGPT says this and that, and sometimes it's on it and you can kind of reinforce it, and sometimes not. You and I share a similar background from the standpoint, you were a rehab coordinator at some point through your career with the Rangers.
Yeah, for a brief moment, after my last year in AA in 2018, I moved to Arizona and was out there for the off season running rehab. But Kevin Harmon retired that off season.
Got it.
And so I got moved to the major league staff the next spring. So, but I have covered rehab in the off seasons occasionally. I did work at TMI for an off season to really get my hands into rehab a little more. So
I think that one of the questions I get a lot is what the difference is of how we apply just a lot of our care plans, and how it changes from a player who's not competing and injured and coming back from injury in the rehab side of things versus how we get our guys ready on a daily basis for the 26 that are in season. So from a rehabilitation standpoint, let's say a guy is post-op Tommy John, which is a popular topic in our game right now. How does light therapy start from an immediate first 10 days post-op for you, and then through the spectrum of their rehab program when they start, getting ready to compete again in a throwing program? Acute onset injury, how does that change, or what's your thought process about putting light therapy into their care plan?
We utilize it early. We will dose it down so we weren't going like really hot directly over a scar or a surgical wound. But like I said, the red light side of it, whether it's a red light panel, whether it's the red light bed, or whether it's the actual laser, is great for wound healing. And so you're trying to get the scar and the stitches to heal. If you're looking at a short term, like a debridement of some sort, where you're trying to get a guy back out there within the same season, you want the wound closure to happen as soon as possible so you can get them sweating, you can get them showering, you can get them using modalities like the tubs that we can be, a treadmill pool for, say, that we can do an unweighted running in if we just debrided an ankle and we want to make sure that he's back to being mobile. You can't do that if the stitches are still in there, if the wound is still open. So if we can speed the healing of the skin along, then we can get into doing more things with the other modalities and machines that we have. So I think that's how we use it early, and then you touch on something, the difference between the 26 that we're trying to get on the field and the rehab that are with us, but they're maybe longer term, 2 to 6 weeks out, or maybe out all season. And I think when these guys go from being an everyday, I have lunch and then I work out and then I go to hit and then I go do ground balls and then I go to a meeting and then it's very regimented. And when these guys go into rehab and they don't have a game to work towards, they kind of flounder. So we utilize some of our larger modalities like the red light bed and the sauna and those kind of things to help regiment their day. So we added in like, hey, you're going to come in, we're going to do an assessment, see where we're at today, go over your plan. Then we're going to do our countertop modalities. So, laser, ultrasound, some manual therapy and those things before everyone else comes in. And then once everyone else starts filtering in to get their day started, we're sending them to do the more regimented, hey, you're going to have 20 minutes of red light. You're going to go, hydrate really well. Then you're going to go do your sauna session. You're going to go do a cold plunge. You're going to, we mix in their day and we plan it out for them so that they feel regimented, because without that, they flounder and they find things to get into that maybe we don't want them doing yet, because they start having conversations and start working on a grip or start, talking about something. And if they're not supposed to be throwing and they see a ball laying around, they may pick it up, and then you never know what's going to happen. So it's keeping them busy, keeping them regimented, and keeping them on task. And sometimes that is, hey, let's utilize some of these long form modalities, like a 20-minute session in a red light bed, or a 10-minute sauna, or a contrast of sauna cold plunge, or, just the contrast tubs. Those kind of things can be very beneficial to help regiment their day when they're not in their regular scheduled regimented player, mindset.
It's such a good point. It's a really good idea of using kind of your recovery programs as a scheduling mechanism for guys. It probably helps our schedule, like our actual treatment table schedule, a little bit, to be able to kind of plan those things out just for ourselves and treating all the guys that we need to treat. But also, same thing. I think a lot of people as members would echo that. The high percentage of players are looking for a little bit of structure, or what's next, or not necessarily being told what to do, but they got so much on their mind that if you can take something off their mind and say, you have this, this, and this, and this is how we're going to go through the day, that tends to be digested a little bit better for the players. I also think you bring up a really good point, and this is kind of how I attack red light from a recovery standpoint, in that I kind of have red light works into a couple different ways that we're kind of bouncing back and forth between. And I will use red light and laser therapy as a heating mechanism on some specific tissue that I'm about to do some manual therapy on, for a player that's healthy and preparing for the day. And I'll also incorporate it into kind of our bigger spectrum recovery program, right? And so working on the major league level, we're very lucky. We have a lot of resources to use, whether it be contrast tubs, or whether it be red light beds, or whether it be float tanks, or whether it be a number of different things out there. And I think there's something in my experience of changing the mechanism a little bit, and not just doing the same thing over and over and over again, but like adding in a little bit of variety into the different ways that we can recover and the different avenues we have to do that. So I thought a couple of the articles that we've kind of traded back and forth, and a little piece of in your commentary was you discussed the effects on pain, and how there is a little bit of science out there on like the like DOMS and delayed onset muscle soreness a little bit, which I kind of took to heart, and I started using, because we have those starting pitchers that will throw 110 pitches, come in the next day, tell you they feel great, but we'll see what the next day looks like, because at day two, they're the day two soreness type of guys. So I started actually prescribing the red light bed to some of those day two soreness guys, especially bullpen guys that got to be ready every day, and started prescribing the red light bed to them, post game after they pitch, or on, if you're going to pitch, red light bed is your post game modality. If you're down that day, maybe we do something different and you just go home and go to sleep. Do you see something similar? Do you program things similar kind of to that thought process? Or do you think red light bed or laser, let's use red light bed, let's use infrared sauna bed, some bigger body modality. Is that something you do consistently, like daily, or do you kind of dose it in and as part of a bigger program?
It depends on the player. We've had several guys that just really buy in. So when we are at home and we have the bed there, they will utilize it as a pre, like, hey, I'm going to go eat lunch, then I'm going to go lay in the red light bed for 20 minutes while I'm kind of digesting and settling. And then I'm going to go from there and start my day, because I'll be kind of warmed up and ready to roll. And then I've also had pitchers that's their day one recovery, is a longer form 30 or 40 minute, like really do a long recovery session. And then I've had others that are pregame, like right before the game. They will go. Actually, one of them really likes it for the heat. He used to, he's not with us, the team anymore, but he used to go and turn it on and then go Normatec for 20 minutes and then go back and turn it back on and get in it, and it would be warmer. And he would use that as like kind of his heat mechanism to warm up. But he really felt like, it helped him with his body warm up, But B, a side of it that is touted but not really researched is focus. And he felt like it helped him regain focus, and whether it's it's not a continuous waveform. I mean, obviously there's frequency to it, so there's pulsing, and you can lower that frequency down and get more pulsed red light. And that flashing is subtle, but it's supposed to help with focus and mental stimulation. And it's more of a shorter treatment period for that. So I think he would do like a 15-minute regular continuous wave, higher frequency, and then lower it down and do like a 5-minute focus frequency right before going to the bullpen, essentially. He'd come in and get stretched right after that, and then he'd roll the pen, and that was his way to like lock in for the game, focus up. So there's that aspect of it. But we do have several players that are starters that are all in on the day after they pitch. That's how they start their recovery, is go in, red light, and then they will move from red light to their cardio flush, whatever their cardio or whatever their workout, whatever their plan is that day. That's where they go from there. And then after they've moved around, after they've warmed up, that's when they're like, okay, what's sore? What do I need work on? What do I need to get me ready to go play some light catch today? If that's their program. And then after they've played catch, they've started to narrow down like, hey, what do I really need recovery on? And that's when they come in and really get the hands on, the needles, the massage, the directed therapies, right at shoulder, elbow, back, leg, hip, whatever it is.
Yeah, the old hey, how you feeling today? Oh, I don't know yet. I got to go throw. I got to go do something to figure out where I'm at, which is fair too. I love the incorporation of the kind of the mental preparation here a little bit, and I've used a number of different things because there's so many avenues that we can have guys just kind of lay down and calm. It feels like if you can find any sort of mechanism to get put their phones down for a little bit and just like not be so stimulated all the time, whether that's laying a red light bed, float tank, something where they just have to like let their mind go, that I value that time down for them. And if they can use it with our mental skills coaches to make it productive through breath work or through visualization drills or anything like that, I find value in those things, even if the science is kind of back and forth on the mechanism with which we're kind of providing that time. So I think you've brought this up a few times, and it's caught my eye. I have a couple notes that caught my ear, and I have a couple notes written down because it's something we discuss a lot on these research rundowns. Because obviously we're interested in the literature and what's being published and the importance of making evidence-based decisions for our players. And there's so much that goes along with that. And I think in your first answer, you discussed how like the science for, superficial LED light is pretty stone clad, and we're in a good spot there. But maybe the research on some of the other ways that we use red light is still kind of coming out and up and down a little bit. And I don't think that's just unique to this modality or any modality, right? That's just the evolution of the research kind of part of things. We're constantly trying to find the best right answer. That being said, it's our job as athletic trainers to interpret all of those things and make these decisions. And we're constantly fighting the battle of imperfect science or imperfect data and trying to make perfect decisions. So for you and for your team, how do you guys interpret the research to say, I'm not sure if this is like true or valid, but there's enough there that piques my interest. And we've used the idea of like anecdotal kind of experiences and how that is a part of it. Like our own clinical reasoning of what we're seeing is all part of that decision-making tree. So when you have some data that's maybe not perfect or not ironclad, how does that go into your decision-making process to like, you actually believe this is something that can help your players?
Honestly, we get together and we discuss it, and then we test it. We don't tout a machine or push players to a machine that we haven't tried. And so we will, when I'm like, all right, well, on this laser, it's a 40-watt laser. It's, I've never used something that strong. When we first got it, I was like, all right, what's that feel like? let me do a 5-minute treatment on my forearm. So I will treat myself and burn myself. And I'm like, oh, that gets real hot real quick. You need to keep it moving. So those are things like that we look at the anecdotal evidence on ourselves and test theories on ourselves before we start pushing it on a player. The red light bed, when we first got it, we kind of just spouted the science at players and said, go try it. The science looks like it's there. It's kind of up in the air, but it's being used. So we got one and we want you to use it. And it was a slow uptake the first couple of years because guys were like, I don't know, it's not very comfortable. It's laying on a plastic, like a tanning bed. And it's just, like, what am I supposed to do in there? And, we're like, hey, you can hook music up. You can do whatever. You can actually have your eyes open in it. You don't have to wear the sunglasses in the red light bed. It's just more comfortable sometimes if you do. So guys would go in there, and then we started talking to some of the guys that are wearing their whoops and aura rings and other tracking, type materials. And we started getting anecdotal evidence from these guys, just kind of asking them, hey, what did your HRV do last night after you did the red light bed yesterday? Hey, how was your sleep recovery? And the number of guys that showed improvement in their sleep, in their HRV, in their recovery scores, on their whoops and aura rings and, other devices that they might have, was overwhelming. It was, okay, is it because of the red light? Is it because this guy is obviously doing other modalities as well? Did it have something to do with pairing it with cryo or cold therapy of some sort? We don't know, but we started telling other guys like, hey, so-and-so's whoop said he got a great recovery after doing it. You have one, try it out yourself, see what it does for you. And the fact that guys keep coming back and keep pushing other players towards it tells me it's working for them at least, and for others. So
I think that's we have a similar experience from the standpoint of being honest with the players about what we do and don't know, right? And saying, hey, I'm intrigued by this enough, but I'm not completely sure. I've tried it on myself. I have a relationship maybe with the vendor with things that have worked for us in the past that we think this is a new thing worth giving a shot. I think that honest component of maybe we don't have all the answers all the time, but the answers we don't have, we're working really hard for them, right? For our players and what's best for them. I think that's a great way to start those and continue those conversations. And then the idea of players just creating buy-in to other players is really when things can start to move in a really positive direction. And I think you bring up a really interesting progression that I'm seeing a lot throughout the league, which is guys are wearing the wearables, and this isn't necessarily a workload talk, but they're wearing the whoops and they're wearing like aura rings and their polar straps and they're diving into HRV type things and recovery, tracking recoveries and preparedness. So we've done similar things, and asking players to share their own personal data can be an interesting conversation at times. But when you have that kind of trust piece in that conversation, we've been having some guys start to open up a little bit and ask questions because they're trying to interpret their own numbers, and we can help with that, obviously. So I've found it fascinating for certain guys that are wearing the same tracking device. So, for 5 guys that are wearing Whoop on their own, some they're interested in, their agent, then whatever, and they recover differently based off of different modalities. And maybe red light works a little bit better for one guy versus dry needling for another, or electric stimulation or cold contrast tubs or so on. So diving into some of those things about why it fits for guys. As you brought up an interesting point earlier about the effect of hydration on how things are absorbed, the red light's absorbed. I think that's really fascinating. Gives another mechanism of pushing hydration on guys instead of them just thinking I'm throwing a water bottle in their face every time they come out of the bottom of the inning and get ready to hit. So I think the red light therapy for me, as we continue to dive into the science, is just a fascinating piece, because in our world we have the time and the resources a little bit, and there becomes a piece of the conversation for me sometimes where I tell guys, I'm intrigued by this enough. I think it's worth 20 minutes of your time. It's not going to harm you. And if you and I can continue this conversation over the next couple months, then we can kind of circle back and see what we liked about it, what we didn't. And to your point, they're going back in the clubhouse and talking to each other and other guys that have come from other organizations or maybe have different resources in the off season that they use some of these things, and they start to discuss all of it with each other. And then the next guy comes in and asks the question, and things start to progress a little bit. But it doesn't always just happen like immediately. The answer of like doing this because I want you to doesn't work all that well all the time. We've also seen I'll ask this question. We've talked a lot about laser. We've talked a lot about red light bed, the tanning bed kind of modality, but we've also seen like garments start to come out, infrared garments and things like that. Have you dove into any of those?
Actually, I'm wearing a wearable right now. I've got a shirt on that's got the material in it. I wrote about it, kind of glossed over it in the article. Since then, we met with a company out of Britain that are out of England, I guess, that makes a wearable. Their fabric has minerals woven into it that are bioresponsive. So as your body heat reflects off of it, it creates infrared. They came in spring training and they did a little display for us, a demonstration, and he brought a microscope so he could look at the capillaries in the finger, and he showed us like, this is your blood flow. You can see the blood, you can see the cells moving through. He's like, I'm going to lay one of my materials across your forearm and see what happens. And he laid, a shirt across our forearm, and you could see the cells increase immediately. You're like, well, that increased blood flow in your capillaries. That's great for recovery in terms of, increasing blood flow and stimulating the movement of cells and the movement of, all the things that come with it. So the chemicals, the recovery materials, all of that. So we were like, well, that's pretty amazing, but is that just putting any material on there? So we took another sleeve that we use on pitchers, and we put that on and went under there, and it does not have the same effect. It didn't diminish it at all, but it definitely took away the extra cells that were in there from the red light, the infrared material. So that was immediately, okay, well, this stuff has some science behind it. It seems to be working. Let's go ahead and do some arm sleeves. Let's start there. So we ordered some arm sleeves, put it on a few pitchers, immediately got great feedback. Hey, makes my arm feel looser, makes my arm feel cool, makes my arm feel good. It's not any tighter than, other materials that we were using. Really looks no different than like a Nike arm sleeve, but the feedback was instant and enough that they were like, order more of these, get us more of these. So I reach out, and the guy was like, well, I mean, we do more than arm sleeves. Do you want to get some shirts? Do you want to get some? So I bought some shirts and tights and had a few guys try them on. And the guys were like, this is great. What else do they have? And they had pajamas. So now we have guys that were like buying the pajamas and wearing them not at the field. And that tells me if they're feeling better and they believe in it, they'll spend their money on it. And that's what happened, is they were like, hey, we think this works. Where's the link? Let me buy that. I'm going to buy some. I'm going to buy some for my wife. I'm going to buy some for my friends. Like they think it works. So they jump all in on it. And that company, there's a company out of Japan that's also doing it. Though they don't market it very well outside of Japan, and I don't think they really sell it outside of Japan. So you have to kind of know somebody inside to get it. But there are options coming out, and I think there will be more coming out in the future. And like you said, like if the barrier to getting a guy to do a treatment is time, and having the time to go lay in a red light bed just isn't there, you're going to wear a shirt, you're going to wear a sleeve. Why not get our infrared in that manner? You're going to sleep. Why not throw some pajamas on and get 8 hours of infrared therapy while you're sleeping? And I think that's where we kind of push these guys like, hey, try this out. see what it does. Does your whoop score change? Does your aura ring change? Does your sleep feel better? Do you wake up feeling better? Does your arm feel better? Let us know what you think. And the feedback has been overwhelmingly good.
I love the scientific process of the vendor coming in and doing the demonstration for you. You're like, all right, we're going to try three different types of garments as well, and things that we've used in the past, and see if this actually works. And then, as you start to kind of recommend it to guys, you're looking for subjective and objective data feedback to kind of help make decisions moving forward and things like that, while also just being open to trying something new. I think that's very, very cool. And I think just a shared piece of what PBATS members all kind of discuss, of always trying to push and find something new, but wanting to make good and proper and right decisions and recommendations to our players. And similarly, we do the same thing. We try stuff on ourselves and communicate and bounce ideas off our strength coaches and our physical therapists and all of our performance team to get their perspective on it too. And it's made for a really interesting, robust conversation on the recovery spectrum anyway, for something we've discussed a number of times throughout the Inside Athlete Training podcast. We have guys that play every day and need to be ready every day. And that recovery piece has grown so much in the last recent years that all of the different mechanisms that we can kind of help that process, I think we're open to, but we're skeptical eye trying to decide what's the best, not just bang for buck, but also bang for time and moment and what we're asking for, and how we build our relationships with our players and making recommendations that we think can really help them. So, Jacob, it's a great topic. We've needed to talk about recovery a little bit. I'm glad you brought this up. I appreciate the commentary. And I guess at this point, just any final thoughts from you as far as red light therapy, photobiomodulation, all the different terms that are used for it, and maybe just its impact on your clinical practice as an athlete trainer in professional baseball.
Yeah, I've talked about how we've used it, and I think it's not a center point, but it's definitely a big part of what we push guys towards when we're looking at passive therapies, using some sort of red light or some sort of infrared as part of your recovery. Anecdotally, we've seen great results. Scientifically, the results are starting to come out, and we're seeing some good things. The one thing I would say that I did do is I bought a phototherapy light meter off Amazon, $50. And I started testing all of our stuff this spring just to see what the dosage coming out, what the intensity is coming out. And you'll find out quickly, if you're just buying stuff off of Amazon, you're getting some really bad intensity off of a red light. So you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to get some good red light therapy off of this, belt that you wrap around you. Yeah, you'd have to wear it for 6 hours to get any dosage. If you want, you have to spend money on good products that are tested, third-party tested, and then find out exactly what parameters they were using to test, because sometimes they're saying the dosage on this panel is, a certain amount of, what are they, milliwatts per centimeter squared, and then you take this tester and you put it right up against it, and that's where it is. So if you want that test, you have to be 1 inch off of it. You're 6 inches or a foot off of it. You're not getting the same dosage. And your time has to go up in order to get the dosage you want. So it becomes how to implement the therapy. So sometimes I will, if I'm looking at a guy like, hey, you're using this, we're using it at this distance, let's not use it longer than this amount of time. Or, hey, let's go longer if you're using it from that far away, because the dosage is different. So
using an evidence base to dive into it, not taking things for the surface level information, and going deeper to make sure you're doing what you're actually saying you're doing. It's such a good point, and such a key piece to I think all of our practices and what we're doing. So, Jacob, thank you again very much. Really appreciate it. It's a great topic, I'm sure, and hopefully this will lead to some more discussions on recovery programming and the things that we do to help our players get ready to play every day, get our pitchers ready to throw 100 pitches every 5 days, hopefully, and just really, really appreciate your time. That's the end of this episode of the Research Rundown. We're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for being with us.
All right. Thanks for having me.